Hi, I'm Steve, and I'm your storyteller. Welcome to my channel. Before we begin, I'd love to know you. Drop your name and the place you're listening from in the comments below. And if this is your kind of story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you never miss a tale. Now, find a comfortable spot. Let your body relax. Take a deep breath. And when you're ready, close your eyes and let the story carry you away. Part 1: The Midnight Toll. In the heart of a sleepy village called Elmsbrook, where the streets curled like question marks and lanterns glowed like sleepy eyes, the ancient wormwood clock tower stood as a silent sentinel. For generations, its 12 nightly chimes had lulled the village into slumber. But on this night, beneath a velvet sky salted with stars, it tolled 13. Elara Bell was closing up her cozy bookshop, Bell's Bindings, her hands dusted with the faint scent of parchment and cedarwood. She reached to snuff out the last candle when the unexpected toll froze her in place. 1, 2, 3. The chimes echoed through the village like ripples on a pond, and with each ring, a prickling chill crawled up her spine. 12, then, unmistakably, a 13th. She stepped outside, wrapping her shawl tighter against the sudden wind that swept through the cobblestone lane. Mist unfurled around her boots as if the village itself were exhaling in surprise. The clock tower loomed in the distance, a silhouette etched against the night. Its upper windows glowed faintly, though no one had climbed its spiral staircase in decades. Elara's boots clicked quietly as she made her way down the lane, the old wrought iron street lamps flickering in sympathy with the mystery. A black cat, shadow with eyes, darted across her path and paused, as if to study her. "Midnight's off tune tonight," she whispered, voice barely above the wind. The cat meowed once, then slinked into the fog. Curiosity had always been Elara's companion. It was why she inherited her grandfather's bookshop and why her attic was filled with dust-covered trunks and strange trinkets from forgotten ages. Tonight, that same curiosity stirred with purpose. She turned away from the clock tower, not out of fear, but instinct. Something tugged at her memory, a thread pulling her elsewhere. Her footsteps, instead, led her home, a crooked-roofed cottage that sat comfortably beside the shop. Once inside, she lit the lantern in her attic and ascended the creaky ladder. She hadn't opened her grandfather's trunk in years, not since he passed away, whispering something about time breaking loose. The trunk, marked with the initials OB, sat waiting under a faded tapestry. She opened it, half expecting it to sigh. Inside were items that smelled of old oil and brass, blueprints of gears and clockwork, faded sketches of strange machines, and a broken brass key with the Roman numeral 13 etched into its handle. Her breath caught. The same number as the mysterious chime. Nestled beneath the papers was a leather-bound journal, its corners curled like old leaves. She opened it, revealing spidery handwriting that read, "When the 13th toll returns, the wormwood must be watched. The guardian sleeps. The dream must not awaken." The lantern flickered. A gust of wind, though all windows were closed, rustled the papers on her desk. The brass key trembled and spun in place, as though seeking a lock unseen. Then, a knock. Slow and deliberate, it came from the front door. Elara descended the ladder with caution, the journal clutched to her chest. She opened the door to an empty street, but a single envelope rested on the doorstep. No footprints in the dew-covered ground. No sign of who had left it. She bent to pick it up. On the front, her name in ornate calligraphy. Inside, a folded parchment and a single line written in ink that shimmered faintly blue. "The key turns not in lock but time, where gears and secrets intertwine." Elara stood there in the doorway, the mist curling at her ankles, the brass key warm in her hand, and a sense that something old, something hidden and alive, had just blinked open its eyes. And somewhere in the shadows of Elmsbrook, the wormwood clock ticked on, one beat out of time. Part 2, The Clockmaker's Heirloom. The next morning, Alara woke to the sound of rain tapping gently on her windows. The events of the night before felt like a dream, the chime, the key, the mysterious letter. But when she opened her eyes, the brass key was still on her bedside table, and the letter lay folded next to it. She made herself a cup of strong tea and sat in her favorite armchair by the fireplace. The journal from the attic was in her lap, and she turned to the next page. This one was dated almost 50 years ago. My timekeeper project failed. The 13th hour cannot be contained, not yet, it read. She frowned. What had her grandfather been building? And why was it connected to the clock tower? She decided to visit the only person in Elmsbrook who might have answers, Mr. Tobias Wren, the village's oldest resident and former apprentice to the clockmaker who maintained Wormwood Tower. Tobias lived in a small cottage at the edge of the village, surrounded by broken watches and wind-up toys. He was known for his stories, wild tales most people chalked up to old age. When Alara knocked on his door, it creaked open slowly. "Well, if it isn't the book girl," Tobias said, peeking out with one curious eye. "Come about the toll, have you? You heard it too?" "I haven't heard that 13th chime since I was a boy," he said, motioning her inside. Alara showed him the brass key in the journal. Tobias's face went pale. "That key was your grandfather's. Oscar Bell. Brilliant man. Obsessed with time. What was he building? A regulator. A device meant to stop time from slipping. You see, time isn't just ticking forward like a straight road. It curls, loops, sometimes even forgets itself. That tower, it doesn't just tell time. It guards it." Alara's heart pounded. And the 13th chime? It means the regulator is waking up or breaking down. He stood and rummaged through a drawer, pulling out a faded map of Elmsbrook. In the center, drawn in red ink, was the Wormwood clock. Around it were symbols she didn't recognize. Your grandfather believed there were anchors beneath the village, places that hold time steady. If one of them breaks, time breaks too. He nodded. And the key? It doesn't open a door. It sets the machine. Starts it, maybe stops it. Only those with the right bloodline can use it. Alara looked at the key in her hand. Her grandfather's bloodline. A sudden loud tick echoed from her pocket. She pulled out the brass key. It had begun to pulse with a soft, golden glow. Tobias leaned in. Then it's begun. And you, Alara Bell, are now the keeper of the 13th hour. Part 3, The Hidden Gearworks. Later that evening, the rain had eased into a soft drizzle, and the village of Elmsbrook hummed with the muffled sounds of ordinary life, shop shutters closing, chimneys puffing gentle smoke, and distant laughter fading into twilight. But inside Bell's bindings, the ordinary had been swept aside. Alara had pushed aside shelves of antique atlases to reveal a narrow trapdoor in the floor, one she had never noticed before. Tobias's map hinted at a subterranean passage near her shop, one of the anchors Oscar Bell had marked with the symbol of an hourglass entwined in vines. The brass key had led her here. Literally. At dusk, it had begun to vibrate again, spinning gently in her palm until she stood upon the floorboard that concealed the hatch. Now, with lantern in hand and heart pounding, she descended the narrow steps beneath the trapdoor. The scent of dust, iron, and something older than memory rose to meet her. The passage was carved from dark stone, veined with what looked like metal, not iron or brass, but something that shimmered faintly, as if lit from within. The walls pulsed softly in time with the tick of the wormwood clock. At the end of the corridor, a circular door stood embedded in the wall, marked with a symbol matching the one in the journal, 13 encircled by twisting gears. Elara approached cautiously. The brass key in her hand pulsed brighter as she held it to the lock at the door's center. A low click. Then, silence. Then, whir. The door rotated inward like a vault, revealing a hidden chamber that took her breath away. It was a clockwork cathedral. Massive gears lined the walls, slowly turning with hypnotic grace. Copper pipes curled like vines across the ceiling. A giant pendulum swung silently at the room's center, casting long shadows on the floor. The air thrummed with energy, not mechanical, but something deeper. Something ancient. Elara stepped inside, awe giving way to instinct. Her fingers grazed a console shaped like a crescent moon. Upon it sat a dial with 13 segments, all dark except one. The segment marked I glowed faintly. A note lay on the console. Written in the same spidery hand as the journal, it read, "Only the keeper can align the 13. Do not turn the dial unless the anchors are found. Time must remain tethered." Elara whispered aloud, "Anchors." She pulled the journal from her satchel and flipped through the pages until she found a sketch, 13 symbols, scattered across a hand-drawn map of Elmsbrook. Each one bore an uncanny resemblance to locations she knew: the bell tower, the fountain square, the orchard near the old mill. But 3 had been circled in red. She traced her finger over the one nearest her current location. The hidden gearworks. The second was near the old chapel. The third, the base of Wormwood Clock Tower itself. As her thoughts spun like the gears around her, a sudden vibration rippled through the floor. The dial's second segment flickered. Then, a mechanical voice, soft, feminine, and echoing from the walls, spoke. "Anchor 1, restored. 13th hour calibration, incomplete. Awaiting sequence." Elara's breath caught. She wasn't imagining things. The 13th hour was real. The clock was more than a timekeeper. It was a guardian, and she had just awakened it. But as the voice faded, something else stirred. From the shadowed edges of the chamber came the faint, scraping sound of metal on stone, as if something ancient and forgotten had just begun to move. Elara turned toward the noise, lantern raised high. Out of the darkness, 2 glowing eyes blinked open. Part 4, the map beneath the floorboards. The rain had stopped by the time Elara left Tobias Wren's cottage, though the sky still hung heavy with clouds, as if the village itself was holding its breath. The key in her coat pocket pulsed softly, its glow hidden from the world but not from her heart. Every beat seemed to whisper, "There's more. Look deeper." Back in her bookshop, Bell's Bindings, Elara locked the door behind her and pulled down the blinds. The cozy scent of old books and beeswax polish comforted her, grounding her amidst the storm of questions. She spread the old map Tobias had given her across the reading table, its fragile corners weighted by glass paperweights shaped like owls. The symbols surrounding the Wormwood clock were like no language she knew, loops and arcs, some intersecting, others floating freely like musical notes. Her eyes drifted to one mark near the eastern edge of the village, a spiral enclosed in a square. And then to the words Tobias had murmured, "Anchors beneath the village." She fetched the journal again. This time, she noticed a faint indentation on the inner cover, something pressed hard enough to leave a mark long ago. Elara gently tilted the page under the lamp's glow, and there it was, a matching spiral. Her fingers tingled. She dashed upstairs to the attic, journal in hand. The brass key remained tucked into her pocket, warm against her leg. The tapestry still lay bunched beside the trunk, and the lantern flickered to life with a comforting hiss as she lit it. She stared at the floorboards, oak, weathered, familiar. Yet now, something about them felt off. A breeze. A faint click beneath her feet. Elara knelt and began pressing along the seams of the boards until her hand landed on one that gave just slightly under pressure. Her heart leapt. She fetched a flat chisel from the toolbox in the corner and carefully pried it up. Beneath was a compartment, shallow, dusty, and hiding a rolled piece of vellum bound in red ribbon. She unrolled it on the attic floor. It was another map, a layer beneath Elmsbrook, a hidden level of the village. Gears were drawn into the earth, running like roots beneath the buildings. And at 5 points, star-like symbols pulsed outward like ripples. Anchors. The closest anchor to her. Directly under her bookshop. She stared at the floor, then back at the glowing brass key. The words from the envelope returned to her. The key turns not unlock but time. She pressed the key to the floor, nothing. But then she remembered a loose floor tile in the shop's back room, beneath the old poetry shelf. Her grandfather had once joked that sonnets hid more than broken hearts. Descending quickly, she pushed aside the poetry shelf, revealing the worn tile. The moment she placed the key into the shallow indent beside it, something shifted, a metallic clunk, then a whir like clockwork winding up after a century of sleep. The tile sank an inch, then slowly slid aside, revealing a spiral staircase descending into the dark. Elara grabbed the lantern. She whispered to herself, "Well then. Let's see what rhymes with time." And she stepped below. Part 5. The Chamber of Echoes. The spiral staircase groaned beneath Elara's steps, each one sending a soft metallic echo into the dark below. Her lantern cast flickering light on the stone walls, which were covered in faint etchings. Some looked like tiny clock faces, others like constellations with no names. It was a place out of time. Halfway down, a gust of air rose to meet her. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It was old. Like breathing in a memory. Finally, the stairs ended at a round chamber deep beneath the bookshop. The room was carved into the earth and stone, yet it was far from crude. The floor was a smooth disk of brass and silver, etched with swirling lines that pulsed gently beneath her feet. All around the circular chamber, arched doorways were set into the walls, each one sealed shut by gear-shaped panels bearing different symbols. A low hum filled the space. Faint. Rhythmic. It wasn't the tick of a clock, but the sound of something waiting to be activated. Elara stepped forward, her eyes tracing the lines in the floor. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal made of dark glass, tall and elegant, its top shaped like an open book. Resting on it was something extraordinary, a mirror. But this was no ordinary glass. When she looked into it, she didn't see her reflection. She saw the shop above her. The attic. The street outside. Moving pictures like layers of the village stacked atop each other, shifting as if the mirror were peeling back time itself. And then, a whisper. "Keeper, you have awakened the first anchor." Elara spun around. No one. The voice had echoed from every direction, like a breeze speaking through hollow pipes. "Who are you?" she asked, holding the lantern higher. "This is the Chamber of Echoes," the voice replied gently. "What you hear is not who I am, but what remains." The mirror's images shifted again. This time it showed a man, tall, robed, and bearded, his hands resting on the same pedestal. He was muttering to himself, though no sound reached her ears. She leaned in. Suddenly, a ripple ran through the mirror. The man in the image looked directly at her, though he was centuries in the past. His lips moved, and this time the chamber echoed his words. "To align the 13th hour is to tether the world. The anchors must hold, or time will collapse inward." Do not trust the shadows in human skin. They walk freely now. Elara shivered. Shadows in human skin, she whispered. The voice spoke again, more urgent now. There are 5 anchors. Each must be awakened by the keeper. But not all doors lead forward. Some are traps, echoes twisted by time. Choose the right ones. Elara glanced at the 6 sealed doorways. Only one bore a familiar mark, the spiral enclosed in a square, the same as the anchor shown on the map. As she approached it, the brass key warmed again. She raised it, and a beam of light shot from its tip into the door's center. With a mechanical groan, gears began to spin. The symbol in the center turned slowly, unlocking the ancient seal. The door slid open. Beyond it lay a long corridor lined with glimmering tiles. The walls were covered in carvings, not of words, but of moments. People laughing, mourning, dancing, aging. As she passed each one, the carvings moved, telling silent stories of Elmsbrook through the centuries. Then, another whisper, not from the chamber this time, but from the air around her. He waits in the clock tower. But he is not who he was. Elara froze. Who waits? She asked. But there was no answer. The corridor ended in a small alcove where another pedestal stood, this one with a crystal globe resting atop it. As she touched it, her vision blurred, and for a moment, she was somewhere else. She saw the village blanketed in mist. The clock tower struck 13. The people stopped mid-step, frozen in time. And from the shadows near the fountain square, something emerged, tall, cloaked, with eyes that burned silver. Then it vanished. Elara gasped and stumbled back. The globe dimmed. The pedestal pulsed once beneath her hand. Then the voice returned. Anchor 2, restored. 13th hour calibration, incomplete. 3 remain. As the message faded, the corridor began to crumble behind her. She ran back through the passage, the carvings shattering into dust, the walls groaning under unseen weight. She just reached the chamber as the door sealed behind her with a clang. Breathing hard, Elara stood in the center of the chamber of echoes. 2 of the 5 anchors had now been awakened. But the mystery deepened with every step. Who was the man in the mirror? What was the 13th hour? And who was the one waiting in the tower, no longer who he used to be? Elara knew one thing. This was no longer just a mystery. It was a countdown. Part 6, The Bell Tower's Secret Room. The early morning mist clung to the rooftops of Elmsbrook like forgotten dreams. Elara emerged from beneath Bell's bindings just as the first light broke through the clouds, bathing the cobbled streets in golden haze. The shop door clicked shut behind her, though part of her now lived beneath it, beneath the world everyone else saw. In her hand, she held the glowing key, now slightly dimmer, as if it had spent too much of itself revealing the second anchor. Her eyes turned toward the clock tower that loomed at the village's edge, just beyond the weathered stone bridge. Its hands pointed to 6:47, yet somehow it felt wrong, like a clock pretending to be normal. Tobias had said the Wormwood clock hadn't chimed in 50 years. Now it was time to find out why. Elara reached the base of the tower, its thick wooden doors padlocked shut with a heavy rusted chain. The village council had sealed it decades ago after the tower's keeper had vanished. The story, passed like folklore, was that the bell had rung 13 times at midnight on the day of his disappearance, then never again. She reached into her coat. The brass key glowed faintly again, almost expectant. With a click softer than breath, the key turned the padlock open. The chain unraveled as if sighing in relief. She slipped inside. The tower's interior smelled of iron and time. Dust clung to the air in motes that danced in the light from her lantern. A winding stone staircase hugged the outer wall, leading upward into the unknown. But something immediately caught her attention. A door near the base, barely taller than her shoulder, sat flush against the brick. Most would mistake it for a panel. But Alara saw the spiral square symbol carved just above the knob. The third anchor? The key warmed in her hand. She turned it. Click. The door creaked open with reluctance. Inside was a chamber no larger than a closet, yet it felt limitless. The walls were entirely mirrored, but not like glass. These mirrors bent space, reflecting not just Alara's form, but versions of her, older, younger, shadowed, distorted. One mirror reflected her as a child, sitting on her grandfather's lap reading stories. Another showed her cloaked in fog, holding a blade of silver. A third showed her in the chamber of echoes, but behind her, where no one had stood before, a shadowy figure was watching. She gasped and spun around. The room was empty. Then the walls began to speak, not aloud, but into her mind. This is the room of forgotten choices. You have come far, but not all paths lead forward. Alara's heartbeat quickened. From the floor rose 3 pedestals, each bearing an object. A brass pocket watch, frozen at 13 o'clock. A silver bell etched with the same spiral square symbol. A quill, black as night, still dripping with ink. The mirrors whispered. One reveals the anchor. One awakens the tower. One leads to ruin. Alara closed her eyes. She breathed deeply, remembering Tobias' words, time doesn't always move forward. Sometimes, it circles back to what we forgot to see. The quill was tempting, a symbol of knowledge. But knowledge without guidance was chaos. The bell, that was the obvious choice. The tower's bell. But obvious choices rarely led to truth. Her hand hovered over the pocket watch. 13 o'clock. The time that should not exist. The 13th hour. She picked it up. Immediately, the mirrors fell silent. The pedestals lowered into the floor. A low hum filled the room as the ceiling began to glow with a soft, golden pulse. The pocket watch ticked once, a heavy, echoing tick that vibrated through her chest. A compartment opened in the wall. Inside, another globe, like the one beneath the shop. But this one was fractured, spiderweb cracks running through it. It pulsed faintly, like a dying heartbeat. She touched it. Her vision was swept away. She stood in the bell tower, but in another time, decades ago. The tower keeper, a man with snow-white hair and gloves, wound the great gears with care. The bell swung gently overhead. Then a figure approached him, cloaked, featureless, walking with a strange fluidity, like shadow pretending to be flesh. The tower keeper froze. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. The figure tilted its head. "Time no longer answers to you." Then it raised a hand. And with a scream that shattered the bell, time snapped. Alara jolted back. The mirror room had changed. One of the walls had split open to reveal a staircase spiraling upward, hidden inside the tower itself. The pocket watch in her hand now ticked steadily. The third anchor had awakened. The voice returned, fainter, as though distant now. Anchor 3, restored. 13th hour, stabilizing. Beware the skinwalkers. She blinked. Skinwalkers? Was that what the cloaked figure was? The gears above rumbled softly, like old machinery stretching after a long slumber. And then, for the first time in 50 years, the bell gave a single, deep chime. It rang not at noon, not at midnight, but at the moment Alara stepped onto the hidden staircase. 13 o'clock. Part 7, The Skinwalker's Whisper. The bell's single chime echoed like thunder across Elmsbrook, stirring birds from their roosts and making the old weather vane atop the apothecary tremble. In homes tucked under gabled roofs, lights flickered on. Dogs barked. Windows opened. The villagers heard it. After 50 years, the tower had spoken. And someone, or something, had listened. Elara stood on the hidden spiral staircase, her hand resting lightly on the cold, curved railing. The chime still echoed in her bones. The pocket watch ticked in her coat pocket, steady now, as if time had come back online. But something felt wrong. The air had shifted. The silence that followed the bell was not peaceful, it was watchful. She continued her ascent. Each step groaned underfoot, winding higher through the forgotten innards of the wormwood tower. Dust blanketed everything, and yet the higher she climbed, the cleaner the walls became. As if someone had recently walked this way. When she reached the top, the space opened into the belfry. And there, under the shadow of the great bronze bell, stood a man. He wore a long gray coat, a brimmed hat, and dark gloves. His back was to her. He gazed out the open window toward the awakening village. His posture was still. Too still. "Hello?" Elara called, voice barely above a whisper. The man slowly turned. He had no face. Just smooth, pale skin, like a wax mask, untouched by eyes, nose, or mouth. And yet, Elara felt it watching her. Her heart pounded. The air dropped 10 degrees. Then it spoke. Not aloud. Into her mind, in a whisper that sounded like 100 voices behind a door. "You are early." Elara froze. "What are you?" The faceless head tilted slightly. Its hand reached for something inside the coat. "Don't move," she snapped, drawing the pocket watch from her coat. It now pulsed with soft blue light. The creature stopped. "You carry a broken clock," it said. "You think it protects you." "I've restored 3 anchors," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I know what you did to the tower keeper." A flicker of emotion, or something pretending to be emotion, shimmered across the smooth surface of its head. He chose poorly. It stepped forward. The shadows moved with it, stretching unnaturally. Elara stepped back instinctively. Her foot hit the stair behind her. "Stay away. The anchors hold more than memory. They hold me." It raised a hand. And from the darkness behind the bell, others emerged, tall, faceless, cloaked in human clothing, but wrong in the way they stood, like puppets on invisible strings. Skinwalkers. Elara ran. Down the stairs, heart racing. Behind her, footsteps fell in perfect unison, not rushed, not hurried. They knew she was running. They didn't need to chase her. They were patient. The staircase bent and twisted, the light growing dim. Her lantern flickered. The air tightened, like the stone itself was closing in. Then, a doorway. She burst through it and slammed it shut. Darkness swallowed her. When the ringing in her ears faded, she realized she wasn't in the tower anymore. The room was wide, circular, stone-walled, lit by floating amber orbs that hummed softly. The floor was a mosaic of the same spiral square symbol she'd seen on the bell and the globe beneath Bell's bindings. This was a vault. A sanctuary, hidden in the fabric of the tower. And she was not alone. In the center stood a tall, thin woman wrapped in tattered robes. Her silver hair hung in long strands, and her eyes, milky white, stared directly at Elara, though clearly blind. "I heard the bell," the woman said. "It's been a long time." "Who are you?" Elara asked, breathless. "The last warden of time," the woman replied. "Or what's left of her." She turned and gestured to the walls, where faded murals told stories in spiraling patterns. Elara stepped closer. One mural showed the village of Elmsbrook, untouched, vibrant. Another showed the anchors glowing, connected by silver threads. And then, the tower, cracked, the bell shattered, shadows rising like smoke from its center. "The skinwalkers broke the fourth anchor," the warden said. "Time has been fraying ever since. The bell you rang, it stitched part of it back together. But it also woke them up." Elara's fingers tightened around the watch. "I need to fix this. I need to find the fourth anchor." The warden nodded solemnly. "You will. But not alone. The anchors chose you, and that means you have allies." Elara's mind flicked to Tobias. To the boy with the blindfold. To the girl in the mirror holding the silver blade. "Where's the next one?" The warden moved to the center of the room and placed her palm on the spiral square mosaic. With a deep, grinding sound, the floor opened to reveal a deep pit. Floating within it, suspended in light, was a long, dark object. A sword. Made of obsidian. Its hilt wrapped in leather. Its blade inscribed with the same spiral sigils as the anchors. "The blade of the first keeper," the warden whispered. "It can cut through time, and through the skinwalker's illusion." Elara reached for it. The moment her hand touched the hilt, her vision flashed. She stood at the edge of Elmsbrook, except now, the village was broken. Houses half melted into the ground. People frozen mid-step, their eyes black. The clock tower bent sideways, the bell cracked and silent. The future. A possible future. And in the center of it all stood the faceless man, holding a twisted anchor, pulsing like a heart. She gasped and pulled back. The warden steadied her. "The fourth anchor lies in the Whispering Woods," she said. "But beware, the forest does not forget." Elara nodded, the obsidian blade now strapped across her back. Behind her, the bell tower groaned once more, a sound like awakening thunder. Time was waking up. And the skinwalkers were no longer watching from the shadows. They were hunting. Part 8, The Whispering Woods. The forest stood like a dark wall at the edge of Elmsbrook. Its trees were older than memory, gnarled oaks and towering black pines, their roots clutching the earth like knuckles. Locals called it the Whispering Woods not just because of the wind, but because it spoke, in murmurs that had no wind behind them. It had been centuries since anyone willingly entered. And yet, here Elara stood, at its moss-choked threshold, with a sword on her back and a heavy truth pressing against her ribs. The fourth anchor was in there. Waiting. Watching. Maybe bleeding. She stepped between the trees. Instantly, the air changed. The scent of moss and damp bark overtook her lungs. The light dimmed, even though the sky was still pale outside. The forest swallowed sound. No birds. No wind. No leaves rustling. Just silence. Except there was a sound. Very soft. Like someone breathing just out of reach. Elara didn't draw her sword, not yet. But her hand rested on the hilt. The ground beneath her boots became softer, the path less defined. A narrow trail wound deeper into the trees, curving in odd, spiraling directions. Occasionally, she saw scraps of things nailed to trunks, ribbons, bells, buttons, old photographs turned gray and brittle. Markers. Warnings? She pressed on. About an hour in, the trees shifted. Not literally, or maybe exactly literally. She took 3 steps, and suddenly the path behind her was gone. No breadcrumbs. No broken twigs. Just an endless wall of green. The forest moved. Or maybe time did. She pulled out the pocket watch. It was spinning wildly, ticking forward and backward at once. The forest had no anchor here. She was on her own. That's when the whispers began. Soft. Unclear. Like dozens of voices speaking at once underwater. Elara. Don't go further. You shouldn't have come back. Back? She froze. Who's there? The forest didn't answer. But a child's laughter echoed faintly to her left. Then again. Closer. And she saw it. A figure, small, hunched, maybe 10 years old, standing between two trees, barefoot, back turned, wearing a red coat covered in dust and spiderwebs. It looked familiar. She stepped closer. Hello? Her voice came out thin. The child didn't move. But the sword on her back hummed, the obsidian blade pulsing against her spine. She drew it, slowly. Elara, the child said. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice. She stepped closer and circled slowly. As the child's face came into view, Elara staggered backward in shock. It was her. Herself, at age 10. Pale. Hollow-eyed. Lips trembling. You shouldn't have left me, the child Elara said. I don't understand. You locked it away. In here. The child's hand rose and pointed toward the base of a massive oak tree, its bark twisted in the shape of a face screaming in silence. Suddenly, the ground shook. The air split with a long, groaning creak. The tree was opening. A door, hidden in its trunk, swung inward. Inside was darkness. And inside the darkness, something alive. Elara turned to her child self, but the girl was gone. Only her red coat remained, folded neatly on a stump. Inside the tree was a tunnel, narrow and pulsing like the inside of a throat. She moved carefully, the sword's faint glow lighting the way. As she walked, visions flickered around her, like ghosts in the walls. She saw her parents, arguing as she hid in a closet. She saw her grandmother, whispering stories about time's guardians as she tucked Elara into bed. She saw herself, leaving Elmsbrook at age 17, throwing the old pocket watch in a box, promising to never return. The anchor had been hidden in her. Not physically, but emotionally. A trauma locked so deeply that even time couldn't reach it. Until now. The tunnel ended in a small, circular room. At the center, suspended in midair by thorn vines, was the fourth anchor. But it was cracked. Bleeding red light. Elara approached slowly. Around it, the whispers grew louder, voices pleading, laughing, crying. Time itself was unraveling here, piece by piece, echoing memories and regrets in a haunted symphony. She reached for the anchor. The vines screamed and pulled tighter. Who guards you? She whispered. A voice answered from behind. I do. She spun around, sword raised. Standing at the edge of the chamber was the faceless man. But now, he had a face. Her father's face. Her chest tightened. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes hollow but smiling, his skin pale and waxen. Elara, he said. Come home. Let go of the anchor. Let it rest. Tears welled in her eyes. You're not real. Of course I am. I'm the part you left behind. I'm what you buried when you walked away. The room trembled. The vines began to reach for her. But the sword, the obsidian blade, burned with light. It was time to choose. She stepped forward and, with one clean motion, sliced through the vines. The anchor fell into her hands. The moment it touched her palm, everything changed. The whispers stopped. The darkness peeled back. And the forest exhaled. She stood in the clearing again. The tree was whole. The trail was clear. The child in the red coat was gone. In her hand, the fourth anchor, glowing gold, mended by her remembering. A healing of time. A mending of self. But behind her, in the distance, a low growl rose from the trees. The skinwalkers were coming. And this time, they were not alone. Part 9, The Man in the Portrait. Elara didn't stop running until she saw the crooked chimney of Belle's bindings peeking through the morning mist. The fourth anchor, now secured in her satchel, pulsed faintly, no longer leaking time, but whispering truths and symbols she couldn't yet decipher. Her limbs ached from the journey through the whispering woods, but her mind buzzed with more questions than relief. What had she seen back there? A memory? A manifestation? Or was the forest sentient? Her thoughts were interrupted by the familiar jingle of a bell as she pushed open the door to the bookshop. It was early, the kind of early when the sun hasn't fully committed to rising, and yet, Marlowe was already at the counter, a steaming mug of something far too green for tea in his hand. He looked up. His usual sarcasm was gone. For once, his expression was pure concern. "You look like someone who saw a ghost," he said quietly. "I think I saw myself," she replied. She dropped the satchel on the table. The moment it touched the wood, the anchor began to glow, not dangerously, but with a kind of recognition. Marlowe raised an eyebrow. "That's the fourth?" She nodded. "It was buried. In me." A heavy silence fell between them. Then, Marlowe walked around the counter, gesturing toward the staircase. "There's something you need to see," he said. They climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, a room rarely touched, cluttered with forgotten tomes, broken clocks, and the kind of dust that looked older than most buildings. In the far corner, covered with a velvet cloth and nailed tightly to the wall, was a massive portrait frame. Nearly 8 feet tall. The gold trim had blackened with age. Marlowe stood before it and took a deep breath. "This was here when I inherited the shop. I always thought it was cursed." Elara frowned. "Then why keep it?" He smirked. "Because sometimes cursed things tell the truth." With a dramatic flick, he pulled away the cloth. The portrait revealed a man, tall, pale, dressed in a coat of silver and black. His eyes were mismatched, one gray, the other a deep red. But what caught Elara's attention wasn't the man himself, it was what hung behind him. The anchors. All 7. Floating like planets around his head. She stepped closer. There was something in the way the man was painted, the sharpness of his expression, the way his mouth curled in a half-smile, that felt alive. "Who is he?" she asked. Marlowe sighed. "He has many names. In Elmsbrook folklore, they called him the Time Architect." Elara stared at the anchors in the painting. "He created them?" "More like, he divided time into 7 anchors and gave them to guardians," Marlowe said. "To stop time from collapsing on itself. At least, that's the myth." She stepped even closer, drawn like iron to a magnet. And then the portrait moved. Just barely, the man's eyes blinked. Elara gasped and stepped back. "I saw that," she said. Marlowe's face went pale. "It's reacting to the anchors." Suddenly, the glow from her satchel intensified. The anchor inside was reaching toward the portrait. Before either of them could stop it, the anchor lifted from the bag and floated midair. Lines of light stretched from it to the painting, connecting to the version of itself behind the architect. The room began to hum, deep and resonant. Then, the man in the painting spoke. 4 found. 3 remain. Elara froze. The voice was deep and calm, echoing in a way that made her feel like it had come from inside her head. The man's eyes locked on hers. You carry more than memory, Elara Gray. You carry my legacy. Marlowe drew a protective charm from his pocket, muttering a word under his breath. But the portrait only chuckled softly. Do you think this shop can protect you from what's coming? Elara's mouth felt dry. What is coming? The man tilted his head. The moment time snaps. The fracture point. The hour of shatter. And you. He pointed straight at her. Will stand at its center. Suddenly, the anchor fell to the ground with a clink, and the portrait went still. Dead canvas. Marlowe rushed forward and tossed the velvet back over the frame. The room dimmed instantly, the hum evaporating. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elara broke the silence. So, the anchors don't just protect time. They bind something inside it. Marlowe nodded grimly. And that architect? If he's waking up, then those anchors are not just artifacts. They're locks. And you just unlocked 4 of them. Elara's mind reeled. What had she unleashed? More importantly, what happened when the 7th anchor was found? Downstairs, the pocket watch began ticking again, steady and slow, even though no one had touched it. The hands pointed to 7:07. Not a time. A warning. Part 10, The Collector's Ledger. The attic air still clung to Elara's clothes as she stepped into the cellar of Bell's bindings. Marlowe had handed her a rusted key, one he swore never to use, but now insisted she must. This place predates even the bookshop, he said. Few know it exists. Fewer survive knowing. The cellar wasn't where they kept wine or unsold paperbacks. It was older. The staircase descended in tight spirals, and the air changed as they went deeper. The smell of old parchment mingled with something more metallic, not quite blood, but close enough to make Elara's nerves twitch. A final stone door awaited them at the bottom. Strange glyphs, similar to those etched into the anchors, glowed faintly around the frame. Place your hand here, Marlowe instructed, pointing to a center rune. Elara hesitated, then pressed her palm against it. The glyphs pulsed once, then the door rumbled open. Behind it lay the vault of ledgers. A circular room. No windows. No candles. Yet everything glowed, from the bookshelves built into the stone walls to the floor that shimmered like water, reflecting ghostly shapes that didn't match their own. Hundreds of tomes lined the shelves, all identical, leather-bound, gold-etched, and humming with time signatures. Marlowe pointed to the shelf on the far end, where a single book stood apart. It was thicker, darker, and had a clasp shaped like an eye. That's the collector's ledger. Elara approached it. What's it collect? Names. Every anchor-bearer since the anchors were scattered. It updates itself, when things change. She reached for the book. It was warm to the touch. The eye-shaped clasp blinked open. No protest, no warning. Almost as if it wanted to be read. Inside, the pages were filled with names, dates, and symbols beside each, a spiral, a sun, a broken circle, a star. Many were crossed out with black ink that shimmered like obsidian glass. Marlowe hovered beside her. The ones crossed out are either dead, missing, or consumed by the anchors. She flipped forward until she reached the most recent entries. At the very top was Elara Gray, spiral mark, active. Below her were 3 other names. One was crossed out. 1. Dr. Lenora Vale, crescent mark, crossfold event, deceased. 2. Tomas Venn, broken circle, missing. 3. Kale Wren, flame sigil, active. 4. Elara Gray, spiral mark, active. Elara touched the ink beside Kale Wren's name. It glowed faintly, the color of burning embers. "He's still alive," she whispered. "Where is he?" Marlowe stepped back, eyes cautious. "Kale was the last anchor-bearer before you. He went dark 2 years ago. No one's seen him since the anchor he carried started burning him from the inside." "Which anchor was his?" Elara asked. "The Ember Anchor," Marlowe replied. "The 5th. If it's still with him, and he's alive, he may know more than any of us." She flipped further back and gasped. One page had been torn, violently, jagged at the edge. The name had been removed, scrubbed with ink so dark it bled through 5 pages behind it. "What was this one?" she asked. Marlowe didn't answer immediately. He stared at the empty space as if it haunted him. "Legend says the original anchor-bearer of the 7th was betrayed, and erased from time. Not just killed, but deleted." Elara looked up. "Erased, like never born?" He nodded. "Time does strange things when the anchors shift. Memories collapse. Events reorder. Some say the architect began his descent into madness the day that bearer disappeared. The thought chilled her more than the cold vault floor. Someone, somewhere, had vanished so completely that the ledger could no longer remember them, and this magical book remembered everything. Just then, the lights in the vault dimmed. A sound echoed from the far shelf, not a creak, but a voice. "Another name will be lost soon." Elara and Marlowe spun around. The shimmering ink on the page began to drip, as though it were bleeding. Another line etched itself on the page. "Kale Wren, flame sigil, status, unstable." "No," Elara whispered. "It's happening now." The book snapped shut by itself, the eye-shaped clasp glowing red before blinking shut. Marlowe grabbed her arm. "We need to go. If Kale's destabilizing, he could trigger an anchor implosion. That would rip a city, maybe even a year, right out of existence." Elara didn't argue. She had thought finding the anchors was about preserving time. Now, she realized, every step forward risked collapsing the very reality they stood in. As they climbed out of the vault, the book behind them pulsed once more. Then, without a hand to touch it, it reopened, just one page. And at the bottom, a line etched itself quietly, unseen. "Elara Gray, spiral mark, status, subject TO fracture." Part 11, Ash and Glass. The next morning, Elara stood on the train platform, her coat pulled tight against the wind. The sky was a bruised gray, streaked with amber veins like cracks in porcelain. It hadn't been like that yesterday. Time fractures leave marks, Marlowe had told her before handing over the coordinates to Kale Wren's last known location, an abandoned observatory in Calder Reach, a cliffside town long forgotten by maps. A rift spot. Weak, but growing. "Don't speak his name out loud," he warned. "And if you see fire, run toward it, not away." The train arrived silently, like it had been there all along. She boarded the nearly empty car, clutching her satchel. Inside it, the spiral anchor, humming faintly, and the collector's ledger, which she'd stolen from the vault when Marlowe wasn't looking. She needed answers. She needed Kale. The ride lasted 4 hours, though her watch insisted it was still 9:12 a.m. When Elara stepped off at Calder Reach, the air smelled scorched. The trees were wilted, but the frost on the ground hadn't melted. She climbed the stone steps toward the observatory, passing signs long eroded by sea wind. The building was a hollow shell of cracked domes and shattered glass. Rusted gears lined the walkway, once part of the great telescopes that studied the stars, now twisted metal teeth. At the center of the observatory was a spiral staircase leading down. Not up. She descended. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. At the bottom, the temperature dropped, not to cold, but to a dead stillness. A corridor of glass walls lined either side, and behind them, flickering shadows played out memories. Like holograms made of smoke and ash. She saw herself, arguing with her mother, only that never happened. Another showed a younger Marlowe, tearing pages from a book and tossing them into a furnace. Another showed Cale. He was standing in this very hall. But his eyes burned with light, and his skin shimmered with flickering embers beneath the surface. He looked toward her. Not at the memory, at her. Elara. His voice wasn't smoke or echo. It was real. She spun. Cale stood at the far end of the corridor, no illusion this time. He looked maybe 30, but time had etched something ancient into his posture. His left hand was charred to the wrist, veins glowing beneath cracked skin. Elara Gray, he said softly, walking toward her. Spiral bearer. They finally sent another. I wasn't sent, she said. I followed the burning trail. He gave a dry smile. Then you're cleverer than the rest. Or more reckless. Why are you still holding the ember anchor? She asked. It's killing you. No, Cale said. It's changing me. He raised his arm. From the fingertips, fire flickered, but the flames fell upward, reversed, and bent in slow spirals before vanishing like forgotten dreams. I've seen the structure, he whispered. The framework of time. It's not a river or a line, it's a library. Infinite stories, looping, branching. Anchors aren't just relics, they're keys to entire sections. And someone. He paused, wincing, clutching his chest. Flame crept under his skin like lightning under ice. Someone is burning pages. Elara stepped forward. The collector's ledger said your status was unstable. I'm holding it back, he groaned. But I can't for much longer. The anchor wants to find its siblings. They sing to each other. Do you hear it yet? Elara frowned. I know. But the spiral pulses when something shifts. Then you've only begun. He reached into the folds of his scorched coat and pulled out a glass prism. Inside it, flames swirled like liquid metal. This is a fragment of the ember anchor, he said. I separated it, to slow the decay. If you take it, the anchors will call louder. But you'll also be able to trace them. Even the lost one. The seventh? Elara asked. Cale's expression darkened. The architect buried it in a memory that never happened. Only a fracture walker can reach it now. And that may be you. Before she could respond, the walls began to crack. From the glass corridors, the shadow memories began to bleed outward, seeping through the transparent walls. The illusions twisted, coiled, and screamed. Something's following you, Cale said, backing up. Something old. Is it the architect? No. Worse. A collector sent to erase what you learn. The prism in Cale's hand flared white. He shoved it into Elara's palm. Get out. Follow the fractures. The next anchor is hidden beneath the city of Oran's Fall, under the library that never existed. What about you? She shouted as the glass above shattered and shadows poured in like smoke wolves. I've burned too long to leave. But you still exist. Remember that. and then the shadows lunged. Alara turned and ran, the corridor fracturing behind her. Time warped, one step forward felt like sinking into months. The exit yawned open like a scream. She burst into daylight as the observatory exploded behind her, not in flame, but in reversal. Glass reformed, stone unshattered, and then it all simply vanished. Like it had never been. She felt her knees, gasping. The prism burned cold in her palm. Then, slowly, a word carved itself along its edge, not etched, but whispered by the anchor itself. Oren's Fall. Part 12, The Library That Wasn't. Alara arrived in Oren's Fall beneath a sky the color of faded parchment. It was a city draped in quiet, not the peaceful kind, but the kind where even footsteps seemed like secrets told too loudly. No maps marked this place. No trains ran here. She reached it on foot after following the direction engraved on the glass prism Kale had given her, its light pulsing in one direction only, like a compass of memory. A faded sign greeted her near the city's edge. Welcome to Oren's Fall, where nothing is forgotten, and yet, no one remembers. The buildings were statuesque, clean, orderly, yet lifeless. Ivy-covered stone walls that had never crumbled. Shops displayed items covered in dust, with prices written in a language that shifted when she tried to read it. People moved like shadows, calm, silent, with eyes that flicked past her like she wasn't there. She tried speaking to a vendor near a bookstall. "Excuse me," she said. "Is there a library here?" The woman looked up with eyes as dull as fog. "A library?" "Yes." The woman blinked. "I don't think so. Never heard of one." She was standing in front of a stall selling books. Alara thanked her and moved on. She followed the pulse in the glass prism. Each time she took the wrong turn, it dimmed. Each time she went the right way, it glowed faintly, not brighter, but clearer, like tuning a signal. Eventually, she arrived at a round plaza where an empty lot stretched before her. Just stone tiles and weeds. A place where something once stood. And yet, there it was. She blinked, and for a second, she saw it, a towering building made of black stone and mirror glass windows, crowned with a dome that shimmered like oil on water. Then it was gone. But the anchor pulsed harder. She approached the center of the lot. At her feet, a single book lay open on the stone, pages fluttering despite the windless air. She picked it up. Its title read, "The Library That Wasn't." Inside were pages filled with descriptions of books she'd never heard of. A clock with no hands. The mirror that lied. How to steal time from God. She turned another page, and there it was. Anchor 3, the memory thread. Hidden beneath the library that wasn't. Guarded by the unreader. Speak the forgotten word. Enter. But beware, once you enter, your name begins to blur. Below the entry was a faint line etched into the page. Your name is Alara. Repeat it often. Remember it always. She spoke aloud. I remember. I am Alara Gray. The plaza trembled. Reality peeled like old paint. The sky hiccuped. And the empty lot folded inward, revealing a spiral staircase leading downward into shimmering ink-black stone. She descended. The library that wasn't was vast. Books floated midair, pages turned themselves, and spiral staircases wound in impossible directions, some climbing upward into ceilingless voids, others diving sideways through solid walls. A long hallway opened before her, lit by chandeliers that burned with blue fire. Lining the walls were paintings of faceless librarians, each clutching strange books, each painted with one stroke missing. At the end of the corridor stood a figure robed in pure parchment. It had no face, just a shifting blur where features should be. "The unreader," Elara whispered. It turned, head tilting slightly. Its voice was soundless yet deafening, a whisper inside her mind. "Elara Gray. Pagewalker. Time-bearer. Why do you enter what must not exist?" "I seek the third anchor," she said. "The memory thread. It is dangerous to hold many truths. Your name is already fraying." The unreader stepped aside. Behind it, a grand room opened, a spherical chamber with shelves stretching in concentric circles. At the center hovered a single strand of golden thread, glimmering like sunlight on silk. Elara stepped forward, but the unreader held out a hand. "Answer the riddle. Only then may you take the thread." She nodded. "I am a thing that grows smaller the more you hold on to me. I slip from all, but shape what all become. Forget me, and lose your way. What am I?" Elara closed her eyes. Her mind echoed with Kale's warnings, with her mother's whisper, with her own voice in the corridor of ashen glass. Then, she spoke. "Memory." The unreader nodded once, and unraveled like paper touched by flame. The golden thread floated into her hand. The moment she touched it, everything changed. She stood in the same chamber, but now, it was alive. The library surged with motion, books reshelving themselves, whispers echoing from pages being read elsewhere by unseen readers. But something was wrong. A crack spidered across the far wall, glowing white-hot, like the sky in the last hour before a storm. From the fracture, black smoke poured in, not fire, but untime. Memory erosion. The architect was near. Elara tucked the thread inside her satchel, next to the glass prism. From the corner of her eye, she saw a book open itself. Inside, a page read. Elara Gray left the library that wasn't with the thread of memory, chased by the architect's shadow. She would next descend into the city beneath the sand, where time no longer flowed. She looked up. The books were writing her. She fled. Up the spiraling staircase, through the plaza that no longer looked empty, across streets that whispered forgotten stories as she ran. Back into the city where everyone still said there was no library. As she caught her breath in the alley, a single word etched itself into the prism. Solstice Hollow. Part 13, The City Beneath Sand. The winds of the Kareth Desert were cruel, razors wrapped in silk. Each gust whispered half-buried names and stung like forgotten sins. Elara trudged forward, the sand swallowing her boots, the sun a molten coin nailed to a colorless sky. The glass prism pulsed gently, pointing southeast, where dunes rose like waves frozen mid-collapse. The memory thread nestled deep in her satchel, humming faintly, its presence soothing but strangely heavy, as if it remembered too much. She approached what looked like an ordinary dune, though the compass trembled violently in her palm. When she reached the base, the ground shifted. Inside, a low groan echoed from beneath the sand, as if the desert had just exhaled. The ground gave way. Elara fell. She landed not with a crash, but a strange soft silence, as if sound itself had been left behind above. Sand filtered down from the opening, now sealing itself above her. She was underground, but not in darkness. Before her stretched a city, entombed yet vibrant. Torchlight flickered along sandstone corridors, casting shadows that refused to follow physics. Arches lined the walls, engraved with stories of stars and serpents, sun gods and moon thieves. A single sign hung over an archway, written in faded charcoal. Solstice Hollow, where time was wounded. She stepped inside. The city buzzed, But not with noise, with motion caught mid-breath. Men and women stood frozen in streets, a boy mid-cartwheel, an old merchant offering coins, a woman with hands raised to cover her eyes. Sand covered their feet, like time itself had tried to bury them in shame. They were not statues. They breathed. Barely. Elara waved her hand before a young man's face. No reaction. A note pinned to a wall read, "If you can read this, you are not of this hollow." We tried. We failed. The anchor broke. We are caught in the loop. Find the keeper of seconds. He guards the broken dial. That's when she saw it. Above the city center, suspended from an enormous arch, hung a massive broken sundial, its gnomon bent like a wilted blade. Beneath it stood a figure cloaked in sand silk, unmoving. Elara made her way toward the sundial, careful not to disturb the still-living statues. As she approached the cloaked figure, her presence seemed to trigger something. The figure's head tilted. Then it spoke, slow and dusty, as if the voice hadn't been used in years. "Another has come. A thread-bearer. A name not trapped in the loop." Elara nodded. "You're the keeper of seconds?" "I was once a time mason. Now, I am a warden, a prisoner like them, but cursed to remember." "You seek the fourth anchor, don't you?" She blinked. "You knew? You carry memory on your back. And the scent of the library clings to you." The keeper turned and pointed toward a sunken chamber just beyond the dial. Its doorway flickered like water under moonlight. "The anchor lies within the hourglass cathedral. But the ritual failed before. That's why time froze here. The sands, our lives, no longer flow. If you enter, time will resume. They will awaken. But so will he." Elara felt her throat tighten. "Who?" The keeper said only one name. "The architect." Elara entered the hourglass cathedral, where time slept like a wounded god. Pillars shaped like twisting hourglasses lined the chamber, each one filled with frozen black sand. At the far end sat a stone altar, and above it, embedded in a crystal coffin, was the fourth anchor. A silver watch with no hands. The moment she stepped forward, the temperature dropped. A whisper brushed the back of her neck. "You move forward, even when you should have forgotten how." She turned. And saw him. No longer a blur. Not a shadow. The architect now had form, tall, angular, wrapped in parchment and metal, his face carved from the same void as forgotten dreams. But his eyes were her eyes. Twisted. Hollow. Aged. "You are me," he said, "if you fail. You are me, if you forget why you began." They clashed, not with weapons, but will. The architect flooded the room with doubt, drowning her in alternate futures. She saw herself quitting the journey, living a life in shadows, becoming part of the loop, a statue in Solstice Hollow, a page in the library, a flicker of someone who almost mattered. But then she gripped the watch. The fourth anchor. The no-time watch clicked once. And everything rewound. Just enough. She dodged. She remembered. She whispered her name like a shield. Elara Gray. I am Elara Gray. I will not be unmade. The architect screamed, not in pain, but in rage, as he dissolved into a spiral of broken clocks and paper-thin screams. The anchor pulsed. The sands began to fall. Time moved again. People gasped awake. The city roared to life. Elara stood in the middle of chaos, surrounded by joyful confusion. The keeper of seconds bowed. You've done it. We are unstuck. but the architect now remembers you. His eye is open. He will no longer wait. She nodded. I know. I'll be ready. The fourth anchor now glowed in her hand. Only 3 remained. Part 14, The Church of Silent Hymns. The wind whispered as Alara ascended the narrow mountain trail, climbing toward the monastery carved into the heart of Mount Viral, a peak so steep it kissed thunderclouds and wore halos of lightning. There were no signs, no markers, only a persistent tug from the 4 anchors she now carried. The moment her boot touched the marble threshold, the air changed. Heavier. Hollow. Sacred. The grand iron doors of the monastery stood ajar, weeping rust and cold breath. She pushed through, and silence flooded her ears, not the peaceful kind, but a thick, unnatural emptiness that swallowed even the sound of her footsteps. Inside, it was colder than the desert had ever been hot. The Church of Silent Hymns was not a ruin. It was preserved, untouched by time. Candles lined the long nave, unlit. Statues of faceless saints stood on either side, their hands not in prayer, but pressed to where mouths should have been. And across the threshold was a plaque etched in gold. No voice shall pass. No word shall live. Only silence reveals the truth. She stepped deeper into the nave, and the doors closed behind her with a soundless slam. She should have jumped at that. She felt the vibration, heard nothing. Ahead, the altar glowed faintly with silvery light. There, nestled within an unmarked reliquary, lay the 5th anchor, a thin, golden bell, no bigger than her palm, its clapper missing. It was called the bell that never rang. She took a step forward. And froze. A voice, inside her mind, boomed. You speak in thought. That is still a voice. Her knees buckled. All around her, the faceless saints turned. Stone joints cracked. They moved. This is sacred silence. And you brought your mind's chaos here. Alara clutched her temples. Every memory, every word she had ever spoken to herself, now screamed back at her. Her inner dialogue, so casual before, was now a loudspeaker in a library. And the monks? They were coming. From the side halls, the silent order emerged, hooded figures floating inches above the floor, robes trailing like smoke. Their mouths were sewn shut, their eyes glowed like burning coal and ash. One of them extended a scroll. It unfurled mid-air, words written in fading ink. To earn the anchor, silence your soul. Alara panicked. She tried to quiet her thoughts. Tried meditation, breathing tricks, desperate pleas to herself to shut up, but every thought echoed louder. The monks closed in. Don't panic, she screamed, in her head. Mistake. They lurched forward. One of them reached into her chest, fingers ghosting through flesh, searching for her voice. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Then, a whisper, softer than thought. It wasn't hers. It was the bell. It called to her, not with sound, but with absence. She shut her eyes and stopped fighting her thoughts. She let them come. She acknowledged each one, fear, doubt, pride, sorrow. And she let them float away like candles on dark water. Her mind became still. Not empty, but silent. The monks froze. Then one by one, they bowed. The scroll vanished into ash. The reliquary opened itself, and the bell floated into Alara's hand. The golden metal was weightless and warm, but when she looked closely, her own reflection had no mouth. The 5th anchor pulsed once. And from behind her, a voice spoke, aloud, this time. You silenced the storm within. That is not easy. She turned. The Grand Abbot stood there, once thought lost to time. His mouth was open, but no sound emerged from him, only a presence in her mind like a calm tide. He pointed to a small staircase behind the altar. The path continues there. But beware. The more anchors you gather, the louder your name echoes across the in-between. The architect has heard you. She nodded. Let him. As she descended the spiral staircase, the silence gave way to sound once more. Her boots clicked. The wind moaned through cracks. Her breathing returned. So did her thoughts. But now, they were hers. She carried the bell that never rang in a velvet pouch. It did not chime, but Alara could feel it, pulsing when she came close to truth, or when danger whispered lies. Outside, the mountain sky had darkened. A storm was coming, not of weather, but consequence. Alara now held 5 anchors. 2 remained. And the next one would take her beyond what she thought real, into a place never mapped, and never remembered. Part 15, The Cartographer's Dream. Alara stood at the threshold of sleep, staring at the canvas of stars stretching across the night sky like a breathing map. The trail from the Church of Silent Hymns had led her to an ancient lighthouse at the edge of a forgotten sea, where time collapsed like broken glass underfoot. The sea was not water. It was ink, shifting, rippling, and reflecting places that did not exist. Mountains rose, then bled away. Cities appeared upside down, then disappeared into smears. A boat, made entirely of parchment, waited for her at the edge of the ink. This was the entry point. To the realm of the last cartographer. To dream. Before boarding, Alara opened the bell that never rang. It pulsed once, gently. No danger. But no promise of safety either. The boat stirred when she stepped inside. The moment she sat, the paper hull folded inward, wrapping around her body like a cradle. The boat began to sail without wind, gliding across the ink sea, leaving no wake behind. She drifted for what could have been seconds or centuries. Then the stars began to move. Not twinkle, move, like chess pieces on a galactic board. Lines connected them. Roads appeared in the sky. And then, she blinked. And found herself standing in a library built into the sky, the stars forming the walls, the sea beneath her now a mirror. Every shelf stretched into infinity, and every book was blank. "Where am I?" she whispered. A voice answered, hollow and layered. "You are where truth is drawn, and memory deceives." She turned to find a tall figure wrapped in robes made of stitched maps. His face was obscured by a shifting globe. Rivers flowed where his mouth should be. Mountains blinked where his eyes should rest. He was the last cartographer. "You've come for the 6th anchor," he said, his voice rippling through space like an echo folded in origami. Alara nodded. "But you must first answer this. What road brought you here?" She paused. "I walked the sands, climbed the storm pass, crossed the nameless town, descended the ruins." "No," he interrupted, raising a hand made of quills. "Not how. But why?" Alara was silent. The real answer was simple, terrifying, and still wrapped in fog. "I was chosen," she said. "I didn't ask for this." The cartographer's head rotated. "But you obeyed." Then he gestured, and suddenly a map unfolded in the sky, showing her entire journey from her hometown to this very place. Each moment, each choice, lit up like a firefly. Some she remembered. Others were new to her. Every step you took was written before you lived it. Your map was drawn in dream. She walked toward it, frowning. "Then who drew it?" she asked. The cartographer held out a map fragment, torn and crumpled. On it were drawings, Not roads or rivers, but symbols. A bell. A star. A mirrored city. A face that looked eerily like hers, but older. Wiser. Sadder. "You did," he said. Her skin prickled. In another dream. Another life. Another loop. "This is not your first journey, Alara." She staggered backward. "I don't remember." Memory is the first thing dreams eat. He held up a small glass orb. Inside floated the sixth anchor, a compass with no needle. "To earn this, you must walk the road that was almost yours. The path you could have taken, but didn't." He pointed at a swirling arch of ink in starlight. "There, you will see the version of you who said no. Who never left home. Who lived safe. Who never carried anchors." Alara stepped forward and passed through the arch. Suddenly, she was back in her home. Not ruins. Not storm-beaten. But alive. Her mother called from the kitchen. Her brother read a book on the porch. She could smell dinner, feel warmth, hear laughter. And there she was. Alara, the version who stayed. This Alara had no scars. No calluses. No dreams of crumbling cities or divine relics. She was happy. And normal. And utterly unaware of the architect. This vision walked up to her. "You shouldn't have come," the other Alara said. "You're breaking both of us." Alara gasped. "You remember?" "I always remembered. But I was too afraid." The air cracked around them. Reality strained. Both versions of her were not supposed to exist in the same dream. "Will you take my life away to claim the anchor?" her other self asked. "I'll vanish the moment you choose." Alara hesitated. "You will too, one day," the other whispered. "The journey will cost more than you can imagine." Back in the cartographer's realm, Alara emerged breathless. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had chosen. The alternate Alara was gone. The glass orb opened. The compass with no needle flew into her palm, spinning wildly before settling, pointing not north, but inward. The cartographer bowed. "The path ahead will no longer exist on any map. Even I cannot follow. And you must go alone." The sixth anchor pulsed with power. This one didn't reveal truth, but intuition. A path through chaos. As she turned to leave, the stars dimmed. "The architect moves," the cartographer whispered. "And the final anchor lies in a place outside of time." Part 16, The Edge of All Things. The sky was no longer blue. It wasn't black either. It was fractured glass, suspended in a cosmic dusk, where every shard held a moving image, timelines, dreams, regrets, and forgotten futures. Alara stood on the threshold of reality itself. The sixth anchor pulsed faintly in her hand, its needleless face now glowing like the eye of a storm. It had guided her to this place without roads, signs, or maps, just instinct and that quiet thrum inside her chest. She was at the edge of all things. A rift cracked open before her, where the world ended in silence and unwritten possibility. Below her stretched nothing, a spiraling void, not of darkness, but of unmade ideas. And across that void floated a platform made of time-worn stone, ancient beyond comprehension. It hovered, untouched by gravity or reason. At its center stood a figure in white. Waiting. Watching. Alara breathed deeply, her steps echoing even though there was no ground. The moment she crossed into the floating platform, the silence around her spoke. Not in sound, but memory. She saw herself as a child, crying in her father's arms. She saw the days she buried her brother. She saw her first lie, her last wish, her deepest fear. All laid bare. As if the edge itself was peeling her soul apart, layer by layer. The figure in white turned slowly. It wore no face. Just a mask, a mirror. She could see her reflection in it. But the reflection wasn't mimicking her. It was watching her back. "You are Alara of the Anchors," the figure said, its voice like a chime echoing through a canyon. "And you have come for the seventh." Alara nodded. "Is it here?" "It is everywhere. And nowhere. The seventh anchor is the truth that undoes all things." The mirror-faced figure extended its hand. A door appeared in the air behind it, an ornate arch carved with symbols Alara had only seen once before, on the tombstones of gods. "Enter, and you will face the architect," the figure said. "But know this, he is not your enemy." Alara's brow furrowed. "Then what is he?" "He's your reflection, twisted by belief. He is the dream you almost believed was real." Alara stared at the door. "Will I survive it?" she asked. The mirror shimmered. Her reflection looked tired. "Does a truth survive the telling?" it replied. Without another word, she stepped through the door. She entered a hall of echoes. Every wall, floor, and ceiling shimmered like a silver ocean. Her steps caused ripples in time, and memories began to leak from the walls. She saw the previous Alara, the one who stayed behind. She saw herself in futures that never came, one where she ruled an empire of silence, another where she disappeared into madness, whispering the names of the anchors to shadows. Then came the whispers. What if you are the dream? What if the world was never broken? What if this was your escape from something worse? At the end of the hall stood a throne, not majestic, but humble, crafted from the bones of vanished ages. Dust clung to it like reverence. And seated upon it was the architect. He looked human. Young. Old. Timeless. He wore a coat made of Alara's choices, fragments of moments stitched together like a mosaic. His eyes were mismatched, one burning like a sun, the other empty as the void. He smiled. I've been waiting, Alara. She felt her body tremble, not from fear, but familiarity. You created the anchors? He nodded. To keep the world stable when belief fractured it. She stepped closer. But they're breaking things instead. Because they were never meant to be found, he replied. They are cages. Not keys. And you've opened 6. One more, and the life falls apart. Alara looked down at her hands. The anchors glowed, trembling. Then why leave me here? The architect stood. Because you led yourself here. He stepped closer. I am not your enemy. I am your conclusion. The room began to fall apart. Walls peeled into strips of sound. Floors became flowing memories. The throne dissolved into forgotten language. You have one choice left, the architect said, standing in the middle of unraveling time. You can destroy the 7th anchor, and wake the world from this illusion. Or you can keep the dream alive. Protect the lie. Let the anchors keep reality from falling apart. She swallowed. Which is the right choice? The architect touched her forehead. And suddenly, she saw everything. Every timeline. Every version of herself. Every truth and every lie. The world was not what it seemed. Not broken. But trapped in a repeating story, retold by kings, prophets, and fools. The anchors were never relics. They were plot devices. And she was the only character who ever questioned the script. You are not the chosen one, the architect whispered. You are the one who refused to follow the path. And so, you broke it. Alara looked at the seventh anchor, a simple seed glowing with unimaginable potential. What happens if I plant it? She asked. Then the story ends. And something real begins. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and planted it. The hall dissolved. The anchors vanished. The architect smiled. You chose truth. She opened her eyes and was home. Not in the past. Not a dream. But a world reborn. No anchors. No silence. Just possibility. Part 17, The Morning Without Maps. When Alara awoke, there were no stars in the sky. There was no sky at all. Only light. Soft, endless light, like the first breath of dawn stretched across eternity. It shimmered, not with brilliance, but with peace. And for the first time in her life, Alara didn't feel like a visitor in her own skin. She stood barefoot on warm earth that pulsed gently beneath her soles, as if the world itself was breathing. The air smelled of memory and hope, though she couldn't explain how she knew the scent of such things. Around her stretched a land unlike any she had known, not built, but becoming. Grasses hummed. Trees were still shaping their branches. Rivers carved new paths as they flowed, not constrained by banks or rules. The sky above began to form, a canvas waiting for someone to paint it with belief, not to trap it. And in that living world, Alara was no longer a seeker. She was a beginner. She walked for hours without feeling tired, not because the journey was easy, but because it wasn't weighted with purpose anymore. She wasn't chasing answers. She wasn't following signs. She was simply walking. A child appeared on the path ahead. No older than 10. Barefoot, with messy hair and curious eyes. He waved. Are you new? He asked, as if Alara had just moved into the neighborhood. She smiled. I guess I am. He nodded, satisfied. I'm Ren. I've been here since last morning. How many mornings have there been? She asked. Ren shrugged. 1. But more are coming. He ran off, chasing a bird that hadn't decided yet what kind of bird it wanted to be. Alara kept walking. Every step reshaped the land, not destructively, but creatively. A trail of blue blossoms bloomed behind her, vanishing seconds later, as if the world was remembering her only gently. She passed a man painting a house with no walls. A woman writing a song with no notes. A boy sculpting statues that looked like clouds. No one was building to impress. They were creating to understand. And Alara felt something inside her stir, a wish not born of need, but of freedom. She reached a hill and sat down to watch the first sunset of this world. It was hesitant, like a child learning to draw, but beautiful in its rawness. The colors didn't blend right, and the shapes didn't match. But it was honest. She heard footsteps behind her. Did you find it? A voice asked. She turned, and saw Kale. But he wasn't the same. His eyes held warmth now, not calculation. His posture was relaxed, unarmed. Like someone who finally let go of the weight he'd carried for far too long. I didn't find the truth, Alara said. I let it find me. They sat in silence. There were no more anchors to discuss. No more gods to challenge. No more maps to follow. Just the moment. What do we do now? Kale asked softly. Alara looked around, the land still shaping itself, the people playing with ideas, the wind carrying laughter instead of commands. She smiled. We write the world by living in it. He nodded. And what will you write? She leaned back on the grass and looked up at the newly forming stars. I don't know yet. And that felt perfectly okay. Night fell gently. Not with darkness, but with wonder. Dreams were no longer escapes. They were invitations. Alara closed her eyes, not to run from reality, but to join it more deeply. And in her sleep, the world dreamed with her, mountains shaped like music, forests made of shared stories, and skies where every star was a memory waiting to be born. The morning without maps had arrived. And it would never end, because it was not a place. It was a beginning. Part 18, The Story That Tells Itself. It began with a whisper. Not in Alara's ears, but in the world itself. Wherever she walked, the land seemed to hum in tune with her thoughts. Not in submission, but in companionship. The trees rustled in cadence with her heartbeat. The wind slowed when she paused. Even the sun seemed to wait for her to decide whether she wanted morning or twilight. And then the words began appearing. Not written. Not spoken. Just there. Floating in the air like fireflies. Softly glowing sentences that drifted beside her, then faded into mist. She couldn't tell who was writing them, or if they were being written at all. She walked into the hush of a world not yet awake, her footsteps painting the silence gold. She blinked. Another sentence bloomed in the air. She was not alone. The story had found her. Alara followed the trail of living words. They floated like breadcrumbs, each one poetic, each one feeling strangely familiar, like they came from a book she had once dreamed of reading but never found on a shelf. Eventually, the trail ended in front of a giant tree. It was old, not in age, but in presence. Its bark was marked with sentences and languages she didn't recognize, yet somehow understood. Its leaves whispered in rhyme. And beneath it sat a figure. Not young, not old. Not male, not female. Just present. They looked up and smiled at her like an old friend. You've made it far, they said. Alara tilted her head. Where's this? The center of the unwritten, the figure replied. Here, stories are born before they're told. Who are you? I'm the listener. The listener didn't blink. They didn't even seem to breathe. Yet their presence was calming, like a fireplace in winter or a lullaby hummed across centuries. You're not writing this place, the listener said. You're allowing it to write itself through you. I don't understand, Alara whispered. The listener gestured to the tree. This is the story root. Every world born of curiosity, every dream spun from wonder, every truth shaped by love or fear, it all passes through here. This world you're in, it isn't real because it exists. It's real because it's being witnessed. Alara stepped closer to the tree. The bark shimmered. She placed her hand on it, and saw flashes of scenes, a child inventing a new color, a blind woman sculpting laughter, a city built entirely from kindness. She pulled her hand back, overwhelmed. Why me? She asked. Why did this world choose me? The listener stood. Because you stopped asking for answers. You started listening. And more importantly, you let go of needing to finish the story. Alara looked down. All her life had been a chase, for maps, truths, relics, roles. Now, for the first time, she didn't want anything finished. She wanted it to continue. The listener reached out and placed something in her palm. It was a quill. Not ornate. Not magical. Just simple and real. This is not a tool, the listener said. It's a choice. A choice to write? No. A choice to witness. The world no longer needs authors. It needs those brave enough to let it unfold, and to hold the silence between its breaths. As the listener faded, not with drama but with grace, the story root's leaves began falling. But they didn't fall to the ground. They hovered, each leaf containing a phrase, a thought, a character. And Alara knew what came next. She was not the author. She was the keeper of the moments that chose to exist. She sat beneath the tree, closed her eyes, and let the next line write itself. And so the girl who searched for meaning became the quiet that allowed it to speak. Part 19, the final thread. Alara sat beneath the story root, her hand open, the quill untouched beside her. Time no longer moved, it unfolded. There were no days here, only moments, and each one shimmered like dew on the edge of a new possibility. She had learned to live in the stillness between events. But even stillness, sometimes, echoes. A sound stirred at the edge of the world, a note not sung in centuries. A voice. Faint at first, then clearer. Alara? Her breath caught. No one had spoken her name in this place for what felt like lifetimes. She opened her eyes. From the mist came a shape, a person. Clothed in travel-worn garb, their eyes filled with recognition and disbelief. It was Taryn. Her oldest friend. The one she left behind before crossing the threshold of stars. The one she had told goodbye without explaining why. He had been her anchor to the life before the mysteries, the laughter and quiet nights, the silent presence that had said, "You don't need to be more. Just be." And now he stood before her, in this world unbound by memory or future. "I found you," he whispered. Alara stood slowly, heart thunderous. "How?" He looked around, bewildered by the world of light and story. "I followed the tear you left in the sky." She blinked. "The sky? You remember the night you crossed the veil? You left behind a trail of stardust that never faded. I studied it. Mapped it. Chased it." He stepped closer. "I knew you weren't gone. Just somewhere else. And I knew if I could find the final thread you left hanging, I could follow it." Alara's hands trembled. "I didn't mean to leave without a goodbye," she said. "Not really. I was afraid you'd stop me." "I would have," he said gently. "Because I loved you." A silence fell between them, deeper than pain, softer than regret. Around them, the air changed. The story root quivered. The sky above flickered, not in danger, but in transition. Because two timelines had met. Two stories, unfinished. "What is this place?" Taryn asked. Alara looked around, her voice steady. "It's the space between telling and listening. It's not made. It's discovered." Taryn stepped beside her. "Then why does it feel like something here is ending?" Alara knew why. Because her presence here had been a healing, a listening, a pause. But Taryn brought a question. A final one. "Is there a last page?" he asked. "To your story?" Alara looked at the sky. "No," she said. "But there is a last thread." Taryn frowned. "What is it?" She walked toward the hilltop. The same one where she'd watched the world reshape itself. He followed. As they stood at the edge of the world, she reached into her robe and pulled out a single silver thread, fine as mist, bright as moonlight. "This," she said, "is the first memory I gave up to cross into this realm. The last tether to the self I once was." Taryn stared. "Why do you still have it?" "Because no story is whole if you abandon where it began." She turned to him, eyes brimming with something ancient and young all at once. "I never needed to forget you," she said. I only needed to remember why I left. And why did you? He asked. Alara smiled, small and real. To find the silence loud enough to hear truth. Taryn held out his hand. Then come home. But she didn't take it. Not yet. Instead, she placed the final thread into the ground. The earth shimmered, and from it, a bridge began to grow. Not made of stone or magic, but of shared memory. A bridge back to the world of beginnings. To the people still dreaming in fear and hope. To a place where stories weren't free yet, but wanted to be. I can't go back to stay, she whispered. Taryn nodded. Then come back to share. And so they crossed the bridge together. As they walked, the world behind them did not vanish. It waited. Like a favorite book on a shelf, never closed, always willing to be opened again. Alara would return someday, perhaps as a visitor. A whisper. A breeze. But for now, there was one final thing she had to do. Part 20, the story begins again. The world Alara returned to was familiar, but no longer the same. The sky stretched wide over cities full of hurried people, quiet alleys filled with the weight of forgotten dreams, and forests that still remembered how to listen. But Alara herself had changed. She didn't walk through the world anymore, she walked with it. Taryn stayed by her side as she stepped back into the city where her journey had begun. The streets seemed narrower now, the noise louder, but it was not unpleasant. It was real. And real, she had learned, was sacred. They didn't speak much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because they both understood the importance of space between words. They made their way to the old plaza, the one Alara had passed through every day on her way to the archives. She remembered how it used to feel, busy, rushed, like people were always late for something. Now, she noticed something else. A child spinning in circles, laughing at the sky. An old man feeding pigeons, telling them stories. A woman sitting alone, eyes closed, as if listening to music only she could hear. Life was still happening. But no one had yet noticed that a new story had returned to it. Until Alara reached into her bag and pulled out the quill. Taryn watched as she knelt in the center of the plaza and placed the quill on the cobblestones. People stopped. Not because of a great display of magic, but because something in the air shifted. A sense that something unusual was about to begin. Alara stood. I'm not here to change the world, she said, her voice carrying even though it was soft. I'm here to remind it that it was always a story worth telling. She reached into her satchel again and pulled out a blank book. No title. No author name. She placed it beside the quill. Then she did something strange. She stepped back and sat down. Just like that. As if she were waiting for something, or someone, to take the next step. A child approached first. Wide-eyed, curious. He picked up the quill, looked at the blank pages, then back at her. What do I write? He asked. Whatever you see, Alara said. Whatever you feel. Whatever you believe might be possible. The boy sat beside her and began to write. A minute passed. Then another child came. Then an old man. A teenager. A woman with pain on her hands. One by one, they joined her. Not to be taught, but to remember. Word of the Plaza of Pages, as people began calling it, spread fast. Within weeks, it became a place where anyone could come and add a piece of their own story. Not in perfection. Not for applause. Just to offer. A dream. A fear. A prayer. A joke. An idea. Soon, stories began to shape the city. Artists painted their dreams on walls. Musicians composed songs from strangers' sentences. Children acted out tales written by elders. The city became woven with meaning, not imposed from above, but grown from within. Belara never claimed credit. She never gave lectures or asked for interviews. She just sat, smiled, and listened. Sometimes she would close her eyes and feel the old world calling, the one beneath sand and stars, the one where stories were born in silence. She knew she could return any time. But now she understood something even deeper. Everywhere is the center of the story, if someone is brave enough to listen. One evening, Taryn joined her on the plaza bench. They watched a young girl write something in the book, then skip away, humming. "What do you think she wrote?" he asked. Belara smiled. "I think she wrote the beginning."